People Not Pozos came out of the community when the community was trying to come to grips with the negative health impacts of the Alanco Energy drilling site in terms of their emissions and their what we consider to be poisoning of the community because of the chemicals that they use at that facility and the lack of proper operating procedures that enable these fugitive emissions to escape into the community and affect the community in a lot of different ways. Kids were getting profuse nosebleeds. There was flare-ups of asthma, or where people had dormant asthma, it would come back, or new cases. There was cases of extreme headaches, odors that were really affecting the quality of life in the community. Women, they use what's called endocrine disruptors there that affect the reproductive health of infants and also affect pregnant women themselves. What started happening was these kind of health effects were coming out, and the community didn't even really realize. A lot of them didn't even know that Alanco existed. They thought that the wall that that surrounds Alanco Energy was part of Mount St. Mary's, which is the university, the women's university right next door. So there's no signage that says this is an oil drilling site. This particular community is principally monolingual Spanish speaking and maybe aren't able to interpret some of the limited signage that they do see. That is when People Not Pozos came together to deal with that in trying to help themselves, the community trying to help themselves from the onslaught of all these emissions coming from and affecting the health of the community.
Es que me da pena, pero bueno, pero sí yo quiero decirles y dejarles bien calco que yo siento que eso le afectó mucho, mi hijo era un niño bien sano y de repente le salió el cáncer de no sé qué y murió, agradable y ya me voy porque si no voy a llorar, pero sí, espero y logren su lucha y lo quiten o hagan algo porque sí nos afecta a muchas personas.
Yo lo que les puedo decir, nosotros tenemos mucho tiempo viviendo ahí, ¿verdad? Como 20 o más de 20 años. Y desde ese tiempo, pues ese pozo da mucho problema. Porque ahorita pues no se siente, pero yo digo que sí trabaja. Pero siempre esta hora del aire, es un olor muy feo. Pero sí se ha sentido. Luego huele feo a huevo, huele a gasolina, gas. Huele fuerte que hasta se ahoga uno. Y una vez mi hija estaba adentro y se estaba ahogando de ese olor y yo le puse el ventilador porque ella ya no podía ni respirar. Como anda un poco mal, que ella tiene como ¿cómo se llama? Asma. Un poquito asma y le hacía mucho daño eso. Y la niña estaba chiquita. Y como yo cuidaba niños, también ahí los tenía. Y yo fui allá al pozo y no había nadie, pero estaba abierto y yo me metí, les hablé que mucho humo y no me hacían caso, que ellos no olían nada. A ver, ellos no olían. Y los traje para que salieran y vieran, pues que ellos no olían nada. Le digo, entonces yo estoy soñando que ese olor, le digo, llega bien feo. Y no nomás yo, había la otra señora que vive en la esquina también. Sus hijos dicen que le salía sangre por la nariz. Y pues, y mucho tiempo duramos malas del pecho. Pues era de todos los días. Tenemos mucho tiempo luchando con ese pozo.
In Wilmington and in Carson, there are a lot of people who live right next to an oil drilling site, and they experience a lot with asthma, birth defects, cancer, and sometimes people don't really know that the big thing that they have behind their backyard is causing these problems. Refineries are also very common here. There's 5 big refineries here in our neighborhoods. I live currently next to the biggest refinery, just called Marathon, and normally in the night, it looks like a whole entire different city because there's a lot of lights, there's a lot of smoke that comes out, there's a lot of like flaring too. That is not supposed to happen, but it does happen. And living next to the refinery it shouldn't be normalized. I remember last year in 2021, there was an earthquake here in Carson. And I actually lived really close to the epicenter, and I remember I heard a big bang and I was like, what is that? And I went on Twitter right away and I found out that there was actually something happening at the Marathon refinery. I had no idea what it was, and I just remember going outside and there was a lot of black smoke. Not a lot of people knew, and here in Carson, these refineries actually don't tell the community what's happening. You have to wait until you hear something in the news, and they don't really share any emergency routes or any escape routes. They don't share anything. I remember going outside and just seeing my neighbors. We were all confused. We had no idea what was going on. That's what it is living here in Carson. You're not really aware of what's going on. I just hope that the communities here in the South Bay get to see a cleaner environment, in their lifetime. I just wish we can go to school and literally see trees instead of a big refinery.
These infrastructures, they create this impact on people that, essentially it affects their whole life. You see these kind of infrastructures in the form of oil wells and refineries and oil pipelines that are underground. They're under people's backyards, under their houses. So through time, these oil wells become a ticking time bomb. It's hot crude oil that passes through these outdated pipelines. They get thinner and thinner, and eventually you have situations which have happened where the oil seeps through people's backyards. You run the risk of children who, being children, they like playing the dirt in the grass, and they're gonna end up playing with that oil too. That is toxic to them. Eventually, these oil structures, I wouldn't even call them structures, I would just call them ticking time bombs. The industry is not taking care of or managing these structures. If I recall, there was an incident on Neptune Street in Wilmington where the oil actually seeped through people's grass front yards, and there were literally kids playing. And people came for cleanup and they came in hazmat suits, but at the same time, there were still community members out there without the protection. The fact that our community is being sacrificed for corporate profits, from the oil industry, it definitely feels it feels horrible, you know, because my health is being compromised for what? A corporation that doesn't exactly care for the community. It feels frustrating because why should I bear the burden of something that I have no fault in, right? We're challenging this environmentally racist system that has been put in place to hold us back, but where we're pushing against it by, you know, the advocacy in our community, by empowering youth, by making sure people are educated on the issues that affect our very communities. We're advocating to make sure that we have clean air, clean water, and clean soil. You know, those are some of the basic things that we need in life. We don't own Mother Earth. Mother Earth owns us. If we're not taking care of Mother Earth, we will see the consequences of that.
One of my first memories is my DeSoto Refinery multiplication pencil. We got in 3rd grade. If you passed your rounds, the teacher was giving us a gift from one of our sponsors, you know, because they cared about our education. You know, they just don't necessarily care about our health. Yeah, I mean, the exposure to oil industry, royalties, and goods has always been present in Wilmington. We are worth more than this, every single one of us, and we have been diluted to believe, because of these industries' power and money and access, to believe that anything good that we get in Wilmington as residents has to be because of the refineries and the oil drilling sites. I've been in so many areas and spaces where I've heard youth testify and say, I've been able to apply to universities and colleges, and I've been able to get access to work because of these industries. It's a really dangerous and extractive narrative. You know, it makes our community members divide and have a very this versus them dynamic, and it has folks believe that you can only succeed in Wilmington if you have oil industry money, and that's not true. You can succeed in Wilmington if you have community, you have support, you have agency. We are the most important resource here, and we are not going to let anybody tell us that the most important thing to come from Wilmington is something that's being extracted from the ground. In order for us to thrive, we have to build power and we have to shift it in order for us to be able to be free from the impacts of the fossil fuel industry and be free of these systems that rely on white supremacy, on money, just being extractive to people of color.
What I like to focus on is the Watts Towers. I take a lot of people there personally, myself, from elderly to young people, and what I like to make the emphasis on is what I call biomimicry. You know, the way that Simon Rodia built those Watts Towers, let's think about it in a figurative sense. He took what was considered to be everyone's trash, you know, broken plates and bottles, broken pieces of people's life, and he put it together so beautifully and masterfully, where the geometry of it and the foundation of it can't be broken. You know, there have been several times the city of Los Angeles has tried to demolish the Watts Towers, and it did not budge. That represents the strength of the community throughout all the You know, we have all the isms of the world, you know, racism, which was very obvious in the redlining in the community. And then we also have our more notable migration of African Americans from down south to Watts. And it was a rich culture. You know, it was very vibrant. It was a lot of business. You know, Watts was an agricultural community. And so we want to get back to the agriculture and back to the basics in life, because that's what has us very separated today. No matter who you speak to and where the people come from, they can relate to what's happening here. You know, this is a universal issue. And so I just talk about the love in the community, especially the music and the arts and culture that they can relate to. And also like all of the elders who have fought for this community, and most who are not here today. But as I tell them, I wake up with the ancestors and God every day. And so it's just really a story of a love, resilience, and what I see for the future when it comes to that is just a thriving community. Whatever's on, you know, the line right now, whatever they say is going to happen, I believe so much that these things will not come to fruition, because it's a great spiritual connection to the land. Our water board is so strong, you know. We have I believe over 12 aquifers in the community. And when you think about currency, like that water flowing through the community, I call it the promised land. And there's a lot of promises that have been broken. That's because we've been listening to man, but it's a greater promise than that. And so that's pretty much what I bring it back to in relation to Watts. She's a mother, our mother.
I just feel like it's not fair that we have to experience so much contamination. And we literally sit on a corridor full of industrial polluters. I'm talking lumber yards, metal recycling, all different type of things. And all I want my little sister, or like, you know, cousins or friends and stuff, to be able to breathe clean air, to not worry about, you know, getting asthma or bronchitis because of the pollution in the air, because it happens. What I really hope for Watts is that they at least take up all this contaminated dirt, because we have so many like contaminated areas, and our soil is our main thing. How can we grow and have prosperous fruits and vegetables, and like we would want to like grow our own, because I have a vision for Watts to like have our own community farms, and like, you know, so we can all bring in new things into Watts and like pay for Watts, and everything is just community. But how can we do this if our soil is contaminated? 50 plus years of soil, heavy metals, contamination, that's hazardous. Like that's not safe at all. And then all they do is just dump more new dirt on it. So it's like you adding new dirt to old problems. How can Watts grow if we don't have at least soil?
Day I hustle cause I know it's gonna work. They ask me where I'm going, I probably say I'm gonna work. They ask me what I'm doing, New Year's Eve, I'm chillin'. Got an ounce from Netflix, box in the building. Got a pot of lentils and we jumping through the ceiling. What I'm doing 2019, building, making beats, buying property, doing me, I got receipts. Keep your drama, stop including me. In your beef, in your tweets, cement and me giggling, kissing under the sheets, crack the heat. I'm from the Tropic of Cancer. The streets ain't romantic, get you stuck in a slammer. I was drinking Faygo, you was drinking Fanta. You still lying to your kids, let them believe it's Santa. I'm nice with it, like your daddy after mama catch him cheating. Feel like Kodak, see a crackhead, hit that like I'm scheming. Went to night schools, played ball in college. Corporate America, they see I got knowledge. Lisa showed me roots, since then I can't call it. Grandpa, mama, daddy, all alcoholics. Lisa showed me roots, since then I can't call it. Hey, every day I hustle, cause I know it's gonna work. They ask me where I'm going, I probably say I'm going to work. Every day I hustle, cause I know it's gonna work. They ask me where I'm going, probably say I'm going to work. $5 in my account, but that rent paid. No food in the fridge, but my tummy ain't empty. $5 in my account, but that rent paid. No food in the fridge, but my tummy ain't empty. Just made juice for the whole squad. My homie said she feeling like a whole god. Skin shining, eating good, I know you're peak mid. Got the studio back on line, shout out to Sneak Gay. Can't run away from the pressure, partners need me. Mama gave me everything she said.
Povungno is a 500-acre village, the homeland of the Ahashiman and the Tongva people. It's located there in Long Beach. It's documented as being our creation site or our immersion site. I call myself a Ahashiman tribal culture bearer. My mother's name was Lillian Robles, and she was very connected to the land. I can remember being a little girl, and I was about 3 years old, and she would carry me. And in our yard, we had these trees, and the leaves of them were silver, and they were green on the other side. And when the wind blew through them, they were certainly magical. But she would say, "Hear that? That's the voice of God." And so she always instilled in me this great love for the land, love for nature, but also connectedness. As California Indians, we say that we've lived here forever. So what's forever? Like the scientists, they say forever is 10,000 years, but we say it's even more. I don't know what forever is, but I know that most Indian people and my people and we know that we're part of nature. We know in our creation stories, in our oral tradition, we call the animals our relatives, the plants that provide us our medicines, our food, the things we use for housing materials, for basketry, all of those things, that they're very important, that we're in a position to care for them. Everything has changed. There's actually drilling going on right now in the wetlands. We're living in a society that's totally out of balance. And if you look, even at the wetlands, since 1925 is when the oil development began there, the long-term damage that has been done there, the pollution that most people live under, the pollution in Los Angeles Basin, and the pollution that these extractive oil energies create. That's what I think is important, that we change from looking at things in the short term to looking at what happens 7 generations from now. We as human beings, we have a responsibility to take care of the land, our relatives, the plants and animals, the earth. Everything is finite. These huge changes that we see, the global warming and the changing in weathers, the fires, but those are real things. They're not going to go away until we actively make lifestyle changes. This connectedness to the land is a huge part of Native American cosmology, present day life. And if you look, everywhere in the world. The indigenous people are the ones who are saying, no, that road can't be built. It will change our communities. It will change the hunting. It will change the way we live, whether it's in Alaska or whether it's oil exploration in Brazil and in the Amazon, or whether it's here in the Los Cerritos wetlands.
Palapatakwaya, palapatakwaya, nonatakwaya, nonatakwaya, palapahikya, palapahikya, nonahikya, nonahikya, palapatakwaya, palapatakwaya. Nonatakwaya, nonatakwaya, palapahikya, palapahikya, nonahikya, nonahikya. Mariki wonchawe, mariki wonchawe, kikatum pongkwan, kikatum pongkwan. Mariki wonchawe, mariki wonchawe, kikatum pongkwan, kikatum pongkwan.
People not Pozos came out of the community when the community was trying to come to grips with the negative health impacts of the Alanco Energy drilling site in terms of their emissions and their what we consider to be poisoning of the community.
And we are not going to let anybody tell us that the most important thing to come from Wilmington is something that's being extracted from the ground.
It is not enough to just speak your truths. You must shout them. You must sing them into sky and storm and sow them into soil to create showers of lightning bolts that electrocute epiphany into the chests of those around you.